Hello and welcome to Run Testers. My name's Nick, and in this video we're going to be comparing the Adidas Prime X Strung and the Adidas Prime X2 Strung. The Prime X is Adidas's regulation breaching super shoe. Obviously the Prime X2 is the one that came out recently, but the Prime X1 is still widely available, so we wanted to compare the two shoes in case you see both of them out there, and maybe you can pick up a good deal on the one and see which one is going to be worth it. You're going to need a good deal because it's a very expensive shoe. It costs £230 in the UK, that's the Prime X1. The Prime X2 is £250, and they're both $300. The Prime X1 is much lighter shoe, it's 266 grams or 9.4 ounces in my UK size 9, whereas the Prime X2 is 313 grams or 11 ounces in the same size. Prime X1 has an 8.5mm drop. Prime X2 that comes down to 6.5mm, but the overall stack height goes up with the Prime X2. It's 50mm at the heel and 43.5mm at the forefoot. Prime X1 is 49.5mm at the heel, so very close to 50mm, and then 41mm at the forefoot. So the key differences between the two shoes are in the midsole. Now both have a big high stack of Adidas's Light Strike Pro foam, the bouncy foam that's used in the Adidas Pro 3 as well. But with the Prime X2, you've got 3 layers of it. You can see there, 1, 2, 3, and those sandwich 2 carbon plates that run one the full length of the shoe and one just under the forefoot. Whereas with the Prime X1, you've got 2 layers of Light Strike Pro foam, and then you've got Adidas's energy rods, carbon-infused energy rods in there, and then some TPU plastic energy blades under the forefoot. Basically, there's a whole load of stuff in there. All of it is designed to propel you forward and make you run fast, but quite different setups. And the Adidas Prime X2 also has a much more substantial midsole. It's wider, and you've also got no cutouts on the bottom of the shoe in order to make it a bit more stable, and that's really where the weight gain comes from. Both shoes use a continental rubber outsole, like you see on a lot of Adidas shoes. You've got slightly more exposed foam on the Prime X1, but in general, all the key impact areas are well covered and it grips pretty well. And you've got the strung upper, which is Adidas's layered yarn upper. There's slight tweaks to it though. With the Prime X1, you've got a gusseted tongue, whereas you've got this stretchy sock-like booty style fit for the Prime X2 rather than that gusseted tongue, and it looks like they're similar otherwise. We've got a slightly wider fit in the Prime X2, I'd say. Same heel design, but the actual heel fits very differently on the two shoes, which we'll come on to in the fit section now.
So fit for me, I ran in a UK 8.5, which is my regular size in both of these shoes. The original Strung I found absolutely bang on, spot on, true to size. You've got to work a bit to get the tongue in the right place because it's not connected. You have to sort of fiddle with that a little bit. Once it's laced down, these hold well, they fit well, they're snug but not restrictive. There's enough room in the toe box. I found that was one of the best things about the shoe, was the way that they fit overall, particularly compared to the sort of more fussy Adidas Pros. Now, my problem here with the Strung 2 is that booty fit. I've got big, high insteps, I've got wide feet, and I struggle to get them on. It's a real pain to get them on. I absolutely hate putting them on. That is never a good thing. Once they're on, fits all right, it's pretty good. They're snug, they're a bit more snug than the Strung originals, but overall I get, reasonable hold. I've got a little bit of slipping in the heel, but I would still recommend going true to size in that shoe. So for me, it's true to size in both shoes. I much prefer the overall fit of the original Strung. That wrestling to get the shoe on for me is a big, hate it.
So I have both of these shoes in a UK size 8. I am a UK size 8. It's worth noting that Adidas shoes do tend to be a little bit on the small size, so people tend to size up half a size in them. What I would say is the original Prime X Strung, I found it to be a little bit short. I'd definitely go up half a size in this shoe. I found it to be quite uncomfortable, and my toe was touching the end of the shoe. I also, when it comes to fit, I didn't really find the upper that comfortable. One of the main problems I have with it is the heel section. I got some major heel rub in this shoe, and it made my heel bleed quite a bit when I was out testing it, because it has this sort of pointy, non-padded heel section on it. So not very comfortable, and I would go up half size in the original. The new version, I've still gone to a size 8. It's a little bit roomier. There's still not loads of room in the forefoot for me. I've probably done about 80k in this shoe now, and I've not done any issues at all. I found it to be very comfortable, and I would stick to my size 8, but it's still not as roomy as some people might want from a shoe in the front of the toe box. The other thing I'd say about this shoe is that the upper for me is a lot more comfortable than the original. It holds my foot in place a lot nicer. I know some people probably don't like this new elasticated bit at the top. Works for me, makes the shoe feel very nice and comfortable. I can get a nice lockdown fit in it. And the back section, There isn't seemingly any more padding on the heel section of the shoe, but I've not had any issues at all with heel rub. It's very comfortable.
So I have a UK size 9 with both versions of the Prime X. That's my normal running shoe size here in the UK. With Adidas, it's a US 9.5. With lots of other brands, it's a US 10. So sometimes Adidas shoes can fit me a little bit tightly, but I have the right length in both of these shoes. The heel fit on the Prime X1 was a nightmare for me. I had really bad heel rub, even when I did heel lock the shoe, and that really diminished my enjoyment of the shoe. That seems to have been fixed with the Prime X2 for me. I've had no heel rub with this shoe at all. Even though it looks quite similar, the design at the heel, I guess overall the upper in general has a slightly better lockdown around the midfoot in particular, and overall I prefer the fit of the two for sure. It does create quite a nice secure lockdown in the shoe, especially, which is good considering it's such a tall stack of foam that your foot is sitting on. So both of the Prime X shoes are great fun to run in and ridiculously bouncy. I do think they have quite different rides. The Prime X1 has a faster turnover, a more aggressive rocker. It is notably lighter and it feels like it's tipping you forward a little bit more. I think that's partially because the drop's a little bit higher as well, and it's less stable. Like, it's quite a wobbly shoe. I really like using this for fast training sessions, but it's the kind of shoe where I would think about where I was going to run. I try and pick it up for a fast run, go to a nice flat place where I could go and hammer out a quick run without having to take too many turns or worry about dodgy pavements or anything like that, or even use it down at the track. It feels very much like a thoroughbred, fast-running shoe for races and fast sessions. Now, the Prime X2 is even more bouncy, I'd say, but it's less aggressive in how it feels when you're running. It doesn't tip you forward quite as much. You've got that really big spring from the way the foam is set up with those two plates, and it's definitely more stable all round because of the way the midsole's been set up without the big cutout, the slightly lower drop, in general, the wider design. It's a shoe that feels like it's great for cruising around in at any pace, really, probably up to around marathon pace, but I think it loses some of the speed that you get with the Prime X1. When you start pushing beyond that, it doesn't feel quite so nippy. It's harder to turn your feet over quickly because it's such a big shoe. It feels like it's one for cruising, but it is noticeably more stable. Like, it's kind of, I can pick it up and use it for a daily training run, and I don't really have to think about where I'm going to go and run. You can go on cambered pavements, you can dodge around tree roots and pavements and people, and it's not quite so wobbly. It's still not the most stable shoe in the world, obviously, but it's a lot more stable than the one in my experience. So I did a track session last week using both shoes to kind of directly compare them. So basically I was doing a 1 mile rep, then 10 400s, and then another mile rep. So halfway through the 400s, I changed from the 2 into the 1. It really was noticeable straight away when I pulled on the Prime X1 just how much faster and lighter it feels. Like, it really does feel very aggressive. Like, I was hitting the same paces in both shoes. It was quite a controlled session, but I felt much more comfortable turning my feet over faster on the 400s in the Prime X1. And I feel like maybe you get a little bit more bounce from the Prime X2, but I think you do get a more aggressive ride. And especially when you start to tire at the end of a rep, or when you're really pushing fast, I think it's better to have the slightly more tippy forward feeling I got from the Prime X1. It just has that slightly more aggressive feel, whereas when you're running at controlled fast paces, the Prime X2 does feel really, really good because it's so bouncy. You get that exaggerated flight time, and it really feels like you're booming along. When you are tired or trying to really run fast, it's just a little bit harder to pick up and turn your feet over in this shoe, I found. To kind of highlight the difference between the two shoes, like, one of the runs I did when I was testing the Prime X1 was a fast 10k, progressing the pace from around 345 a k right down to sub 320 per k over the course of that run. Went to a nice flat spot, ran hard, it felt great. It's exactly the kind of run I would do in the Prime X1, but I really wouldn't want to do in the Prime X2. It would just feel a bit too big for that kind of run. But then when I've been testing the Prime X2, I've been doing lots of quite easy daily training runs, going from easy to steady paces, a nice controlled 10k, at a decent-ish pace, that kind of thing, and then a controlled track session. That's exactly the kind of run that I do in the Prime X2 that I wouldn't feel so great doing the Prime X1, because I'd just be going out on pavements near me, and this more stable, controlled feeling you get from the shoe makes those kind of daily training runs really fun. But then when you're looking for all-out pace, I think the Prime X1 is the shoe that has it.
So although these shoes are first and second generations of the same shoe, they are actually very different. The original Prime X Strung, it is an incredibly bouncy shoe. It really just propels you forward. It is great. It's a really fun shoe to wear. My favourite sort of run for this shoe is sort of 10k to 15k distance, where I'm just going out and it's a daily run, and I just want something to help me bounce along and make that run a little bit more enjoyable. It's quite hard to run at a slow pace in this shoe. It really does make you pick up the pace a little bit. The thing I would say about this shoe, which I don't really like very much, is the stack height. I'm not massively against big stack height shoes, but what I found about this shoe is it is very, very thin. And as a result, it's quite a wobbly shoe. I've used this for a half marathon race in Eastbourne, and by the end of the race, I was really tired. It was quite a hard half marathon. There was a really big, steep incline in it. And what I found about this shoe is that I really had to pay attention to it because it was quite wobbly. And that's not necessarily a bad thing all the time. I'm not always against wobbly shoes, but I really did notice it in this shoe. And although it's fun, I think if you're using it for longer distances where you might get tired and you're running maybe across roads that aren't very even, I think when I was running that Eastbourne race, there was a lot of potholes and stuff, so I really did have to look where my feet were going. But I did find it to be a very fun shoe to wear, apart from that heel rub issue, which meant that sometimes I wouldn't be able to wear it because I would have to wait for my heel to heal before I used it again. But I did think it was a very bouncy, enjoyable shoe, and just felt great, like great fun when you're out on the run. Now the new version, it's a massive difference on the original version. So it's noticeably heavier. It has got a wider base on it, so it does feel a lot more stable. It isn't as bouncy, it isn't as energetic as the first one. But I don't think there's much in it. I don't think it becomes really dull like something like the Nova Blast 1 and the Nova Blast 2 had the problem with. But it does feel like it has lost a little bit of the fun magic that you got from the original shoe. Now, I actually prefer the Prime X Strung because I like a bit more stability. But also I've just found it's a really good shoe for faster training runs, longer training runs, things like that, which I couldn't really do in this shoe, the longer ones, because I just didn't like that wobbliness. So I used the second one for a lot of my Berlin, latter Berlin training, where I was doing a lot of tempo runs. I'd have to maintain a pace, my marathon pace, for quite a long time. I was doing 18-mile tempo runs at one point. And this was a really nice shoe for it. I just found that I could get a really nice consistent pace at my marathon pace, which was 4:05 minute kilometers, and this just felt great for it. It is quite a heavy shoe, and when you're holding it, it does feel quite heavy, but when you're actually wearing it, the combination of the plates and the midsole foams, it doesn't feel that heavy on the feet. It feels like it's propulsive, bouncy, and energetic. So I would say that it's a superior version to the Prime X Strung original, but it does lose a little bit of the magic. So if you're used to wearing the shoe and you love the original version, then you're moving to the second version, you're going to notice that, and it's probably going to be a little bit of a disappointment.
So for my run test in these shoes, I've done loads and loads of miles in the Strung original. Loved that shoe. Ran really fast marathon times. Did all my fastest, I think, or second fastest all-out mile, and I've raced a lot in it. I've run a lot in it. I was a real big favourite of it. Absolutely loved it for lots of things. In the X2, I've not raced a marathon. I have done long distance in it. I've done all-out fast miles. And yeah, so I've done most of that mainly on road, a little bit off-road as well, sort of light river paths just to test the stability. And I've also done a side-by-side mile just to compare them, one shoe on each foot, and here is what I found. So I've just done my side-by-side mile. I've got the X2 Strung on my left foot, I've got the Strung on my right foot. Biggest thing that you notice the minute you put both these on is that extra volume of midsole foam in the X2 Strung. As with a lot of shoes that we've seen recently, the brands go, yeah, what do we need to do here? We've got this really lively, really punchy, really energetic, already quite big stack shoe. What do we need more of? I'll tell you what we need more of is more of our lightweight, responsive super foams in there to make them even crazier. These are both absolutely bonkers shoes to run in. The Strung was a bonkers shoe to run in, lively, energetic, fun. The X2 carries on from that, and the changes here, I think, mainly there's just more foam spread across the entire foot. So one of the big things that you feel is actually kind of under the arch of the foot. In the original Strung, there's a cutaway there that means that the heel and the forefoot, they're not disconnected, but you don't feel anything as you kind of roll through that step as much as you do in the X2. I now feel that foam very much under the arch of my foot. So if you needed a bit more arch support, maybe that's a good thing. But I feel it almost like a bit of a bulb. It's a bit, I can feel it under the foot, and it's not necessarily a sort of natural sensation. What it means, I think, is that actually as I'm rolling through my step, it reduces the stability a bit. Neither of these shoes are particularly stable, but I do think that the X2, when you're rolling through your step, lack a little bit of stability. They're a bit more wobbly, they're a little bit less controlled than I found with the original Strungs. The original Strungs just feel a little bit narrower, they feel a little bit more agile, a bit more compact, and I just feel a bit more in control as I'm running through with my steps in each of them. Now when I'm up on my forefoot, running with intent, running at top pace, the way that you engage both these shoes with precision, I think you have to get the best out of them and to kind of avoid some of those instability issues. That's when these shoes, I think, feel least different. They feel all the most the same, whatever way you want to spin it. They feel most similar. When you drop back on your heels and you're running a little bit slower, maybe a little bit more ragged, then now I think the Strung X2, there's more cushioning back there in the heel. I think that's going to provide you a little bit more protection from the impact, at least. It's going to soak up a bit more of the road. Now, the X2 Strung are also a heavier shoe. Can you feel it in the ride? I think you can. I think you notice it generally about how the shoe feels on the foot. It does feel like there's more shoe underfoot. From a fit and comfort perspective, I've obviously got a massive struggle to get into the new X2s with that booty fit. When they're on the foot, weirdly, I think actually they probably hold a little bit more at the back of the toes, and the toe box is probably ever so slightly more restrictive than the original Strung. But what's really interesting, even though you've got that sort of tight fit to get your foot into, the hold, I think, around the heel and the ankles and across the top of the laces is actually a bit looser on the Strung. And I find it a bit more difficult to get a kind of dialed in fit on those. No matter what I do with the laces, it doesn't seem to affect that kind of slight bit of heel slippage. It's not huge, it's minor, but it's more present than it is on the original Strung. Overall, comfort-wise, I think that the original Strung are probably a little bit more comfortable for me because of that slightly roomier toe box. If you like the fit a little bit more dialed in up top, up front, you know, a bit more hugging across that top of the foot, then maybe the Strung X are going to have slightly more race fit there for you. So that's one difference as well.
So my verdict on these two shoes is a tricky one. I would very easily go for the Prime X2 Strung just because I like a bit more stability in it. I don't mind the additional weight because I don't think you really notice it when you're out on the run. I think it's a lovely, enjoyable cruising shoe. It just bounds you along, really smooth transition, and it's just a really solid, better daily shoe than the original. Now, the original is more fun. The original is bouncier. The original just really has the feel of a very, very energetic super shoe. But the downside for me, apart from that heel rub, which is a major issue for me, the downside is the wobbliness of the midsole, which is not a major issue if you're doing short distances, but at those long distances, I did struggle with it. And that's why I much prefer the Prime X2 Strung.
Verdicts, these are both really fun shoes, but I do feel like they end up being good for quite different things in my mind. Like the Prime X1 is a racer, and a shoe that I would reserve for fast sessions and races, owing to the instability you have here and the really aggressive feel. Like you can cruise around in this, it's a good long run shoe as well, but I think overall its best qualities shine when you start running fast. Prime X2 to me feels more like a super trainer in many ways. Like it's kind of you can bring it out every day and bounce through runs wherever you are and have just a really good time. It's a really fun shoe to run in, and then it just lacks, I think, that top end pace because it is a bit heavy and it is just a bit big and hefty on the foot. Whereas despite all the size and weight you have on the Prime X1, which is hardly a super light shoe itself, it feels light enough to really go and pound out very fast stuff because of the way it's set up. I think the Prime X2 is still a decent racing shoe, obviously, and especially looking at something like the Marathon, but it's not one I pick over, 40mm super shoes to do a race in myself, just because it just feels that bit big and slightly more trainer-like to me. So you could get both and live life to the 50mm Stack Max and have a little rotation of two super bouncy super shoes. So if I was getting one though, I would get the Prime X2 because it probably suits what I'd get from the shoe a bit better. Like I wouldn't race in a 50mm shoe myself. I would use the shoes that stick to the regulations myself, and the Prime X1 just is probably a shoe I'd end up using more rarely as a result, not only because of the heel rub, but because of what it's really good at. It would just be for speed sessions here and there, whereas the Prime X2 is a shoe that actually really can hoover up a lot of training miles and make them a lot of fun. So it does suit what I'd get from the shoes quite well. Whether I'd get them any of them at all, we discuss in our actual full reviews of each shoe, but picking between them, I think the Prime X2 suits me better because of what I'm looking for from it is that super trainer feeling of a bouncy shoe you can take out every day without worrying too much about that instability and heel rub.
So I guess one of the big questions that's going to be here is, have they made it better? Is it faster? Is it a better race shoe? Is it punchier, snappier? Is the ride improved in the Strung X2? I'm not entirely sure that it is actually. I don't think that always adding more is, the way forward. And it maybe feels like it's a little bit overdone now. There's a bit too much, kills the stability a bit. Not that there was much stability in the first place. Adds a bit of weight, makes the shoe feel a little bit less agile, a little bit less nimble, and doesn't really add much punch in each step. It's arguably kind of cradling your foot a bit better. So overall, your foot feels held better by the footbed and that midsole and that extra stack of foam right across the base of the shoe than it did in the original Strung. But has that made it a kind of faster shoe? Has it made it better for all-out racing? I'm not really so sure it has. I was perfectly happy with the way that the Strungs ran. I thought they were fast and punchy enough. They gave you everything you needed when you were moving all out. I don't think the Strung X2 have added to that. If anything, perhaps they've sort of reduced it a little bit. They're maybe a little bit sinkier, a little bit less responsive than the Strung. And I think they've made a trade-off here where there's just, because there's a lot more foam, there's just a lot less stability. The uppers I don't think are an improvement either. So yeah, for me, I think my verdict probably is going to be that I would go the Prime X original first, particularly if you can get it at a cheaper price on a deal on knockdown. That's the shoe that I think wins it for me still. It's still the one that I would probably choose to go racing in. The only caveat to that, and I say this a lot, is the danger if you're going to go and chase a marathon time, you're not really sure if you're going to make it the whole way round, and there's a chance that in that last 6 miles you might get ragged and you might need a little bit more protection from the road in terms of the cushioning stack and foot fatigue. Then I think you're going to get a little bit more of that from the Strung X2 than you did from the Strung. But you know, that's again margins, and I don't think it's a huge amount of difference.
That's our comparison of the Prime X 1 and 2. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Are you a fan of both of these shoes or neither of these shoes? Please do like, subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.